abertura da edição nacional de 2023 será em grande estilo, com o Keynote internacional e investigador de crime cibernético, ex-agente da CIA e do FBI e Head Global de Inteligência de Ameaças, Dan Woods. Ele vai falar ao público do Security Leaders sobre sua experiência com o cybercrime, o cenário de ataques na era dos bots e como eles contornam todas as formas de Captcha. Vamos receber com uma salva de palmas calorosa, Dan Woods. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Feel free to present, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, I do not speak Portuguese, so we're going to have to do this in English. I'm going to start right off with some attack traffic. What you're looking at here is the login traffic for one of our customers. You're going to see a few of these over the next few minutes. The date is along the bottom axis. The number of transactions per some unit of time is along the y-axis. This is login traffic. There's a couple problems with this traffic. It doesn't have a day-night pattern. Anytime you're looking at what should be human traffic and it doesn't follow a day-night pattern, that is cause for concern. This is what the traffic looked like prior to the application of any of our client-side signals at F5. Once we applied those signals, all that yellow traffic is malicious attack traffic. The customer estimated that 20 to 30% of their traffic was from malicious bots. So you can imagine how 98% hit this organization. It was rather alarming. And there's the day-night pattern along the bottom of that slide. Think about the consequences of this much attack traffic. It isn't just about fraud. Think about the infrastructure cost handling this many additional transactions. Think about corporate decisions that are being made based on completely flawed metrics. Think about hitting the performance for your legitimate customers. So if you think, look, we have the bot problem, the attack problem handled because, we expected this much fraud and we're only getting this much fraud, so we don't have a fraud problem. Consider all the other costs associated with this many transactions. Here's another example. You see a couple spikes. It looks like it could be attack traffic. Once we apply the signals, you see virtually all of it is attack traffic. The text up there, I highlighted this attack because it comes from nearly 1 million IP addresses, and this is more and more common. The reason is, for more than a decade, we've been mitigating these attacks by IP. So they're hitting some rate limit. So the way these attackers would retool is they start using more IPs fewer times. If their attack is blocked, they use even more IPs fewer times until their attack is successful. So security operations teams, they're usually pretty good at identifying the top few hundred, few thousand noisiest IPs, but they miss the long tail of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of IP addresses. Also came from 182 countries, highly distributed. We were protecting a US government agency, and they were seeing an attack from about 120 countries. They decided to geofence, block every transaction from outside the United States. The very next day, the attack resumed from within the United States. So blocking by IP, autonomous system, region, these are not sustainable countermeasures. Here's another one. You see, does follow a day-night pattern, right? But a trained eye will recognize that the valleys don't go quite low enough. Once we apply the signals, you see the day-night pattern even more clearly. All the red is attack traffic, and I picked this attack because of the blue. These are third parties. These are aggregators, other fintechs, bill-paying services that have the username and password for the customer. They didn't steal it. They were given the username and password. And then they use automation to log in and scrape the contents to provide some value, some service to their customer. This, if you would have told me 10 years ago that so many people would be so willing to give their username and password to a third party, I'd say you were crazy. But This is very popular. There are hundreds and hundreds of these companies that are using automation. It isn't necessarily bad automation, but you certainly should have visibility and control over this automation, or at least have the ability to force them over to the OAuth 2 API so that they can get the contents of that account in a more secure fashion. This is one of the largest attacks we blocked, 6 billion transactions in just a few weeks. The attacker made a coding error in this attack, which was refreshing to find. If you're interested in learning more about the coding error, please let me know, maybe visit the F5 booth. Here's another one. I picked this one because in the left you see in yellow, and then in red, we go into mitigation mode. Yellow, we're flagging it and passing it to origin. Then we went into mitigation mode, and see how quickly this attack went away. This attacker was paying attention. As soon as we go into mitigation mode and the attack stops immediately, that's an indication of a more sophisticated attacker. Sometimes we mitigate an attack, and it will go for weeks and even months. They don't realize they're even being mitigated. You can see after a couple of days, the attack resumed, 3.6 million posts per hour. And this is a common tactic. When they can't get around our countermeasure, they often will try to overwhelm the countermeasure, thinking that it can't handle it, it's going to fail open, and then defeat the countermeasure. The H with the fingerprint, that is a reference to one of our signals. Again, if you're interested in some of the signals we collect, they're very powerful. Follow up with us, and I'd be happy to share that. This one, you really have to zoom in to see the human traffic. You can see all these failed attempts at retooling in red. Those are all mitigated. Why are they doing this on login? They're doing it for credential stuffing. A fraudster takes credential lists of millions, even billions, tries them programmatically against the login page. Because of consumer habits to reuse usernames and passwords, they're ending up taking over 0.1 to 3% of the accounts attempted. That's a significant success rate. All right, so I've talked about login, and a lot of people think that is the only application targeted. Lots of applications are targeted. I have sample attacks, explanations of the motives for every one of these. I'm going to get through as many as I can in the, 10, 15-minute time frame. Then I'm going to switch over to explaining how a common countermeasure, Captcha, how these attackers circumvent Captcha. All right, print, return label, and create account. This is an undercover surveillance video of a woman stealing an item worth $100. Years ago, she'd have to go back into the store, claim she got it as a gift and didn't have a receipt, and want to return it. And she could get away with that once or twice before her picture was on the back of every cash register. Today, she can create an online account in somebody else's name, print a return label, and ship it to the return center. She doesn't even have to go back into the store from which she stole the item. She'll be able to sell that store credit on a secondary market like raise.com and get $90. This is why one person would launch an attack against create account. This is why a criminal organization would launch an attack against create account to create thousands of these fake accounts. They're stealing thousands of items. They cannot return them through one account. Doing so would be anomalous. So this is something we see quite a lot with our e-commerce customers. Money laundering is another reason we see attacks against create account. If the account holds any asset of any kind, and the application allows the transfer of that asset between accounts, and many applications do to accommodate family units, a bad actor, criminal organization, will use automation to create thousands and thousands of these accounts. They'll use automation to deposit assets into that account. They'll use automation to transfer the assets between the accounts, and then they use automation to remove all those assets from the accounts. I've investigated money laundering in my career quite a lot. I remember sitting in my office for weeks and weeks and weeks, poring over bank statements from 5 or 6 bank accounts, trying to follow the money. Very, very tedious. I can't imagine what it would be like to try to follow assets through thousands of accounts. Money laundering impacts every vertical, every company that has an online account that has assets of any kind, frequent flyer miles, gift card balances, cash, of course. Any asset, if you're allowed to move it between the accounts, they're targeted for money laundering. I told you that the login success rate for some of these attacks was 0.1 to 3%. Attackers find that anomalous because it is. Attackers don't want to be anomalous. They want to hide in the noise. So they first look for an application that could tell them whether the account exists or not. I mean, if the account doesn't exist, why try the password? It's going to fail and lower your login success rate. Create account is one of those applications. If they go to create an account and it says, sorry, that username is already taken, that account exists, that's going to go to my credential list for my subsequent credential stuffing attack. If it doesn't exist, they're going to create an account. And if they create an account, now they have what's called a canary account, something that they control. They can log into that over and over again successfully. So that's how they can get their login success rate in the credential stuffing attack up to closer to 65, 70%. This is one of the things that concern me the most. Attacks on create account at social media companies. I did some research on Twitter, now X, when Elon Musk was talking about acquiring them. Twitter was asserting that they had 5% of their traffic was from bots. I'm an expert in this. There's no way 5% of their traffic was from bots. I'm not on any social media, but I did an experiment. I created a fake account on Twitter. First thing I noticed is this obsession with number of followers, that people want followers. Then I found an entire marketplace that you could buy followers. So I paid less than $1,000 US, and my fake account had 102,000 followers. Many of them were obviously fake. You know, the same picture, a random username, obviously fake. Twitter did nothing to remove those. I also paid a premium for what's called sticky accounts. These look real, but they're fake. I bought about 10,000 of those. Then I did some research. I wrote a bot to see if I could automatically create accounts on Twitter, to see what countermeasure I would encounter. And I'm not even a programmer. I was able to write it in a weekend. I didn't encounter any countermeasure until I launched the automation from one IP over and over and over and over again. Then finally, I was hit with a Captcha. It finally thought I was a bot. And all I had to do was change my IP to evade that Captcha. So they had no countermeasure whatsoever. Then there's something else about social media companies. They have a reverse incentive. They don't really want to know how many fake accounts and how many bots they have. They don't, because their value as a company is derived largely from daily active users. You don't want to be the guy in the conference room asking for budget and data scientists to prove, you know, half of your accounts are fake. You're not going to get that budget. So based on all of this, I decided to write a blog and assert that 8 out of 10 Twitter accounts were likely fake. That got Elon Musk's attention, and he tweeted a link to one of my interviews with my picture. So as you can imagine, my phone went kind of crazy when my picture is tweeted to 100 million people throughout the world. But it's interesting. Now it's X. Elon has closed the deal. He says he's taking bots seriously. So you're probably wondering, how many of my fake accounts still exist? As soon as he took over, the number of fake accounts started to go down. And now it's down to about 9 or 10,000. So he got all the low-hanging fruit. He got the easy ones, but he hasn't gotten any of the sticky followers. So he's had a positive impact, but he has a little ways to go. So if any of you know him, please let him know. So why do we care if somebody has fake accounts and fake followers? I don't. But this whole infrastructure, this whole marketplace can and is being abused by state actors, political parties, lobbyists. They create a bunch of fake accounts in social media, control them programmatically, and they can manipulate public opinion. Think about what you could do if you had programmatic access to 10 million social media accounts. You could bury truths. You could amplify lies. And in the United States, where elections are won or lost by a few thousand votes, you can change the outcome of an election. So fraud is bad, but this is the use case that worries me the most. If you give away something for free for opening an account, or you have a refer a friend program, they will create thousands and thousands of accounts just to get that free item over and over again. Free cup of coffee, free donut, free whatever. Here's an attack against the create account endpoint. You can see the inset is 200 per minute. That's how many people were legitimately creating accounts. The rest of it is somebody trying to game a refer a friend program. 99% automated. Even if you could deal with the accounts, think of the costs associated with handling this much additional traffic. Here's another example against the create account endpoint. Peaks at 30 million fake accounts being created per hour. That is mind-blowing. All right, so that's print return label and create account. I have about 15 minutes remaining. I'm going to go a little further. Product search. On the left is the legitimate H&M website. On the right is a replica of that website in Russia. Now, the way this works is the Russian website scrapes the legitimate H&M website and recreates this site in Russia. A Russian will go to the Russian site, make a purchase. The Russian site will use automation to go buy that item from the legitimate site, ship it to a reshipper who ships it to the customer. Of course, they mark up the price. This is how they make their money, by creating one of these duplicate sites. We actually reached out to them and asked them, look, how fresh is this? You know, if I go to H&M, can I buy something that isn't available on your site? And they told us, we scrape the site every day. So every site, this one entity scrapes the entire H&M site, the images, the descriptions, everything, the ratings, manipulates them and creates their own version of the website. They don't even need to maintain an inventory. All they need is a laptop and an internet connection, and they can do this and start making money. And they could do it to dozens of sites, not just one. We call this polite automation because it does it just at midnight. They don't want to interfere. They don't want to cause a problem for the airline. We don't actually know for sure why they do this, nor does the airline. But you can see it's roughly 40 times, 50 times human traffic every day at midnight. Scrapes the seat mapper application. We have a theory as to why. You know, there are companies that will use imagery of shopping malls and then use software to evaluate whether or not the parking lot is full. And how full is it? How many cars out of how many spots? They do this because if it's a full parking lot during business hours, then that shopping mall is doing well. If it's an empty parking lot, then the shopping mall isn't doing so well. So that's one theory as to why this is happening. A full airplane, the airline's doing well. An empty airplane, not doing so well. Check gift card balance. All you need is the card number and the PIN to steal what is on a gift card. You can go to a third party and sell that information. Looking at the anatomy of a gift card number, there are 1 trillion possibilities. And that's only with a 3-digit PIN. A 5 or 8-digit PIN, there are even more. So bots aren't just trying these randomly. They walk into a store, take 2 gift cards off of a kiosk, look at the gift card numbers, and you can see how it really narrows the number of card numbers they have to try. Then they just have to brute force the PIN. All this is done using automation. If you go to any e-commerce site and you try to check your balance and they tell you to call a phone number, they did that because they were under such immense attack, they decided to start handling those calls with humans, which is more expensive. This is code I wrote. Again, I'm not a programmer. I just watched YouTube and Stack Exchange to write this 6 lines of code to launch an attack against the check gift card balance endpoint. By the way, that is my real card number and PIN. My real card number. I didn't redact it, and I was wondering how long it would take for somebody to steal that. It took about 2 years. It's gone. Somebody stole it in one of my audiences. This is a little bit more sophisticated. This adds entropy to the mouse movements and keystrokes. Again, it's only 26 lines of code, and I could have written it even a more compact way. The point is, this isn't hard. It isn't hard at all. If somebody like me can do it without any programming, anybody can do it. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Here's the attack traffic on checked gift card. It's quite significant. All right, so I'm not going to get to the rest of these, but if any of those you want to hear more details about why they're launching automation against it and the downside to it, by the way, sometimes good automation has very negative effects. So if you're interested in learning about any of that, please talk to one of us at the F5 booth right outside the door. So now I'm going to talk about Captcha. This is Google's own online demo of reCAPTCHA. This isn't a weakened implementation. If you look under the hood, you see a text area ID called gReCAPTCHA response, and its display attribute is set to none. If you look right down here where that red arrow is, there's no text box. But if you change the display attribute to inline or delete it altogether, a text box appears in that where that red arrow is. So then I check the I'm not a robot. What happens is there's an API call out to Google, looks at whatever signals it looks at to determine if I'm a human or a bot. If it thinks I'm a bot, and it always thinks I'm a bot, which is frustrating because I use a VPN, it challenges me with ridiculous challenges. Once I finally convince it I am not a robot, I get the green check mark, but I also get a token that goes into that previously hidden text field. So really what I need is a token to go into that field. I do not need to check the checkbox. There are several third-party companies that will do this. Some of them purport to use, it's funny, they purport to use machine learning and artificial intelligence. They don't. They use human click farms. I went to work for a short time at Captcha. This is a Russian human click farm. I really wanted to understand it, so I went through their training, I went through their testing, and I started solving CAPTCHAs for money. And I'll explain that in a minute. This is the way Captcha works. If you have a bot that hits your site and you display a regular CAPTCHA, it's going to take an image of that CAPTCHA, send it to Captcha using the API. Captcha is going to send it to all of its humans, and all of its humans are going to solve that CAPTCHA. This is why their solve rate is so high, because many people are solving it. So they take the most popular answer, in this case overlooks, send it back to the bot through the API. The bot submits it to your site, and you mistakenly see it as human. These are humans working for bots. reCAPTCHA works a little differently. In this situation, the bot will use the API to tell Captcha to ask a human to go to your site and check the box. Now, these are humans, so they're going to get the green check mark. Whatever challenges are thrown at them, they're going to get the green check mark because they are human. They're also going to get a token. And then they hand that token back to the bot, again, through the API. They do not have to check this box now. They just click submit, and they will be seen as human. And all this could be done through one IP address. So the fact that it's happening is transparent to your organization. So here, this is me going through training. I have to solve 9 CAPTCHAs, and I can't make too many mistakes. You can see I'm getting feedback. Some of them are really easy, like this one. A couple of these, like this one, I had no idea, so I said cannot solve, and they say incorrect, and they tell me the answer. So I have to get through all of these in a certain amount of time, and if I don't, then I won't be able to start solving CAPTCHAs for money. This is the user experience for actually solving CAPTCHAs for money. At the top, you can see it says this session And I had solved 18 Captchas at this point, and I haven't even earned 1 penny US yet. Not 1 penny. So I wrote a blog talking about how exploitative this was, and 2 Captcha actually reached out to me. This Russian human click farm reached out to me through F5 and say, we object. It is not exploitative. Many of our Captcha solvers work all day, and they are able to earn up to $3 US each day. And I thought, you're kind of making my point for me, right? Working all day, 12, 14 hours, and you get $3 US, that's pretty exploitative. Sadly, it is enough in some regions of the world to live. Every form of Captcha is solved this way. There is no, if anyone, some Captcha provider says, oh no, these cannot be solved by human click farms, really challenge them as to why. We have humans, are they saying humans can't solve their Captcha? Because that's a problem. So humans solve all in these Captchas, even, the dragging the puzzle piece. My favorite is what they call fun Captcha. There's nothing fun about twirling, an animal until it's right side up. There's nothing fun about that. That is friction. So here is, I'm using 2 Captcha to get my gift card balance. You can see I never check, I'm not a robot. I just use automation to put in the gift card number and the access number. Then I use 2 Captcha's API to get a token. I put it in that box, I click check balance, and I get my balance. And yes, this too was stolen from me just after a short time. And I only present to security professionals. I don't present to anyone else, so there is a mole among us. Okay, that is how to solve Captchas. I think I have 4 minutes, so I'm going to try to get a little bit further along on this. All right, so this is add new credit card. That application is present on many, many organizations. This is an attack against the add new credit card. This is known as carding. In yellow, we're flagging it. In red, that's when we go into mitigation mode. And this automation is on the page you see up there on the upper right. So many of these applications, they leak information. If you put in the credit card number, the expiration date, and the CVV, if it isn't valid, it tells you it's not valid. So if you've got a bunch of stolen credit cards, you want to know if they're valid, they use automation here to test it. We've actually had a large quick service restaurant company, a QSR, that did nothing, I mean nothing, to authenticate and to verify the credit card numbers. They're wondering how much fraud would there be. Because, by the way, verifying the credit card number, there's a cost associated with that. And they're trying to weigh the cost associated with verifying versus the cost of fraud. So they did absolutely nothing. You could put garbage in those fields and you would get your food. Well, it didn't take long. It worked for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, but then the fraudsters found it and they started exploiting it. So then they had to start actually authenticating. Sometimes there's different levels of authentication. You could just make sure it's a valid credit card number and not authorize $1. By the way, the old way of doing this before the internet, these fraudsters would walk up to a gas pump and put in the card to see if they were allowed to pump gas. If they were allowed to pump gas, it meant the gas station authorized $1. So if you're allowed, then that credit card is valid, and they do the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So this is the new digital way of doing carding. Forgot username and password. You've seen this slide before. Remember, attackers wanting to improve their login success rate. They create account is one application. Forgot password is another. This is something you could take back to your organizations immediately. If you go through the forgot password workflow and you get this sort of feedback, this is going to attract bots. And you can fix this very easily. All you need to do is change the feedback to something like, if we have an account, check your email. There'll be instructions on how to reset your password. Just changing that, the bots will no longer attack forgot password. Find a doctor. By the way, this isn't just find a doctor, it's find an agent, it's find a supplier, it's find a contract, find anything. Typically, you have to put in a zip code, maybe some subcategory, and you get all this information. Now, I and maybe many of you are not interested in this information, but many bots, what they do is they scrape all this information from all companies in a vertical. They aggregate it all and then they sell it. So it's apparently valuable to some people to know every doctor in a network, what their specialty is, what their contact information is, what the reviews are, where they went to university. All this is scraped. Is this malicious? No, it's not an attack, it's not malicious, but it's automation you should be aware of so you can have visibility and control over it. All right, I'm down to 30 seconds. Find a doctor, quote, add to cart, searching for hotels and airlines, and there are dozens more. If any of you are interested in learning more about this, then please visit us out at the F5 booth. I return to the US in a few days, but I've left all of Friday open for any follow-up meetings. So, I'm down to 2 seconds. I want to thank you for your time and interest in this topic. I look forward to chatting with any of you outside. Obrigado. Obrigado. Obrigado.